20 Pizza Delivery Scary Stories. True scary stories. Our scary and horror stories are designed to send chills down your spine. Enjoy the spine-tingling stories thrill. Story number 1. The Silent Order. Anna had been working as a pizza delivery driver for a couple of months. One night, she received an order for a large pepperoni pizza. The only special instruction: leave it by the back door. Thinking it was an odd request but not uncommon, she drove to the address. The house was at the end of a long, winding road with no other houses in sight. All the lights were off except for a dim glow from a window in the back. Anna parked her car and cautiously made her way to the back door with the pizza box. As she was about to set the pizza down, she heard a faint whisper, "Thank you." Startled, Anna looked around but saw no one. She left the pizza by the door and quickly made her way back to her car. As she drove away, her phone buzzed. It was a message from her manager. "Anna, that address you delivered to has been abandoned for years. We've never received an order from there before." Story number 2. The Extra Topping. It was a stormy night, rain pouring heavily, when Mark received an order for a medium margarita pizza with a special topping. When he asked the customer over the phone what the special topping was, they replied in a raspy voice, "You'll see." Curious and a bit on edge, Mark prepared the pizza and set off to the address. The house was old and rundown, the door slightly ajar. Mark knocked, but there was no answer. He called out, but still, silence. Pushing the door open cautiously, he stepped inside. The house was cold and had an overpowering musty smell. In the middle of the living room was a table with a single lit candle, revealing an old photograph of a pizza delivery boy. The boy looked eerily like Mark. Suddenly, the door slammed shut. A voice echoed throughout the house, "You're the special topping." Mark dropped the pizza and ran, managing to break a window and escape. He never delivered pizzas again and always wondered who or what was in that house. Story number 3. Forgotten Change. Liz was out for her last delivery of the night. The order was for a small cheese pizza, nothing out of the ordinary. When she reached the address, it was a well-kept house in a quiet suburb. She rang the doorbell, and an old woman answered. The woman seemed sweet, but her hands trembled as she handed Liz the money, exact change down to the last coin. As Liz was about to leave, the woman grabbed her arm. "My son should have given you the tip, dear." Confused, Liz replied that she hadn't seen anyone else. The old woman sighed. "He passed away years ago, delivering pizzas just like you. I always wished he had some change for good luck." Liz felt a cold chill as she remembered the old coin she always kept in her pocket for good luck. It was missing. As she drove away, she glanced at the rearview mirror and saw a young man, holding a coin, standing by the old woman, waving her goodbye. Story number 4. Room 404. James had only one delivery left for the night, and it was to a local hotel. The order was for a meat lover's pizza to room 404. When he arrived at the hotel, he made his way to the 4th floor. Strangely, the hallway lights flickered as he approached room 404. He knocked and waited. After a minute, the door creaked open, revealing a dark room. A voice from the shadows said, "Leave it on the bed." Thinking it was odd but not wanting any trouble, James did as instructed and retreated hastily. When he got back to the pizzeria, he mentioned the eerie delivery to his boss, who looked pale. "That room has been vacant for years. A man died in there under mysterious circumstances, and guests always report strange occurrences." Story number 5. The Faded Picture. Lena was new to the town and her job as a pizza delivery driver. One night, she had a delivery to a house at the edge of town. When she got there, she found a dilapidated mansion, its windows shattered and the front door hanging off its hinges. She was sure she had the wrong address, but then she saw a note on the door. "Please place the pizza in the living room." Curiously, she stepped inside, finding the house eerily pristine except for a thick layer of dust everywhere. In the living room, there was a framed, faded photograph of a family, parents, 2 children, and in the background, a pizza delivery person who looked just like Lena. She felt a sudden cold gust of wind, and as she turned, the front door slammed shut. Whispers surrounded her. "Finally, you've returned." Panicking, she used all her strength to force the door open and sprinted to her car. When she mentioned the address back at the shop, Her coworker informed her that the family in the house had disappeared decades ago, and ever since, every few years, a pizza delivery driver would report the same experience. Story number 6. The Drawn Curtains. Sam always enjoyed night deliveries. The streets were empty, and tips were generally better. One particular night, he had to deliver to an unfamiliar neighborhood. The house was modern, with drawn curtains and dim lighting inside. He rang the doorbell and waited. The door opened to reveal a young child, no older than 10, his face pale and eyes red from crying. Behind him, Sam could hear muffled arguing. "Please hurry, I'm hungry," the boy whispered. Sam handed him the pizza and was about to leave when the boy grabbed his arm. "Can you stay? Just until I finish eating?" Feeling sympathetic, Sam hesitated and then agreed. As the boy ate, the arguing intensified. Suddenly, everything went silent. The boy looked at Sam, tears streaming down his face. "They always fight, and then they forget about me. Every time. Thank you for staying." Sam comforted the boy and decided to call the authorities. When they arrived, they discovered the shocking truth. The parents had been dead for days, and the child, traumatized, had been alone, imagining their voices in his grief-stricken state. Story number 7. The Whispering Woods. Mandy was given an address that led her deep into the forest, along a narrow, winding road. GPS marked the destination at the heart of the woods, but there was no house in sight, just an old, wooden picnic table. She was about to leave when she saw a note. "Leave the pizza on the table. Walk away. Do not look back." Thinking it's some prank, she did as instructed, but as she walked back to her car, whispers echoed through the trees, and the temperature dropped. Mandy resisted the urge to look back, recalling horror stories of spirits that haunted those who met their eyes. As she reached her car and drove away, her rearview mirror revealed shadowy figures standing around the table, their eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. Story number 8. The Never-Ending Hallway. Carlos had a delivery to an old apartment building downtown. He was directed to apartment 1313. The elevator was out of order, so he took the stairs. As he reached the 13th floor, he noticed the hallway seemed much longer than usual. He began walking, but apartment 1313 appeared always just out of reach, like a mirage. Doors on either side whispered his name, trying to lure him. Growing increasingly anxious, he ran, and suddenly, he was in front of 1313. An old man answered, looking surprised. "I didn't order any pizza," he stated. As Carlos turned to leave, he saw the hallway was normal again. Racing down the stairs, he was met by the building's janitor who informed him that the 13th floor had been sealed off for decades due to unexplained phenomena. Story number 9. The Missing Slice. Rebecca had her last delivery to a seemingly ordinary house. A young woman answered, her eyes bloodshot and tired. Rebecca handed over the pizza, but before she could leave, the woman said, "Make sure all slices are there." Finding the request odd, Rebecca opened the box. To her surprise, one slice was missing. The woman's expression turned from exhaustion to terror. "He's here," she whispered. Suddenly, an icy wind blew, extinguishing the lights. When they flickered back on, the woman was gone, and in place of the missing slice was a note that read, "I always take my share." Back at the pizza place, Rebecca learned from an old-timer that years ago, a pizza delivery driver went mad, believing customers were shortchanging him, and vowed to always take a piece for himself. They say he still haunts the town, making sure he gets his slice. Story number 10. The Clock's Warning. Jake delivered to a mansion he had never seen before. The grand clock outside chimed as he approached, striking midnight. An elderly woman, draped in a veil, answered the door. She didn't speak but pointed to a grand room where a party seemed to be in full swing. Oddly, Jake couldn't hear any music or chatter. He placed the pizza on a table, but when he turned around, the room was empty. No guests, no elderly woman. The mansion felt cold and abandoned. The grand clock outside began to chime again, but this time it struck 13 times. Remembering tales of the haunted hour, he raced out of the mansion. The next day, curious, he researched the mansion. He discovered that a century ago, a grand party was held there. At midnight, a fire broke out, trapping everyone inside. Legend had it that once every year, the spirits replay that night, always searching for an exit. Story number 11. The Voiceless Child. As the evening grew darker, Jenna was assigned a delivery to a quiet neighborhood. The house she arrived at seemed old and weathered, with paint peeling off and the garden overgrown. The only sign of life was a flickering light from one of the upstairs windows. When she rang the bell, the door slowly creaked open to reveal a young girl, no older than 6, wearing a tattered white dress. The child didn't speak but motioned for Jenna to follow her upstairs. Hesitantly, Jenna did. The girl led her to a room where the flickering light came from an old television set showing static. The girl pointed to the TV and then to an old photograph on the dresser. It was a picture of the same girl, holding a pizza box, standing with a family. The date on the photo read, 1973. Jenna, realizing she was in a house that time forgot, placed the pizza on the dresser and made a hasty exit. The next day, when she described the house to her colleagues, they informed her that the house had burned down in the 70s, claiming the lives of the family inside. Story number 12. Echoes from the Cellar. Ray had always been fearless, so when an order came in from the edge of town, where rumors said an abandoned house stood, he didn't think twice. Arriving at the dilapidated property, he noticed the front door was slightly open. A faint voice from inside beckoned, "Down here, in the cellar." Swallowing his unease, Ray descended the creaky steps. In the dim light, he could see old furniture covered in dust and cobwebs. Suddenly, a voice whispered right in his ear, "Closer." Ray felt a cold hand on his back, pushing him deeper into the cellar. He stumbled upon old pizza boxes, all from his pizzeria. On each box was a delivery date, and they spanned back decades. The last box had today's date. Terrified, Ray ran out, leaving the pizza behind. Back at the shop, he learned that every few years, a delivery driver would disappear after going to that address. He had been the next target but was lucky to escape. Story number 13. The Reversed Reflection. Amelia delivered to a modern home in a posh part of the city. A polite man answered, inviting her in while he fetched his wallet. As Amelia waited, she noticed a large ornate mirror in the hallway. Looking into it, she saw the reflection of the living room, but something was off. There were people in the reflection that weren't in the real room. They were shadowy figures, standing still, staring directly at her with piercing eyes. The man returned and noticed her gaze. "Beautiful mirror, isn't it? Been in my family for generations." Handing her the money, he added, "They say it's a window to the other side. The souls you see, they're trapped, always looking for a way out. But they need a replacement to do so." As Amelia left in a hurry, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. At home, she noticed her reflection lagging a few seconds behind her movements, reminding her of the eerie mirror. Story number 14. The Frozen Time. Derek arrived at a quaint cottage surrounded by thick woods. The order had specifically mentioned, "Deliver at exactly 9:15 p.m. As he approached the door, he noticed all the clocks in the house were stuck at 9:14. An elderly man opened the door, his eyes filled with urgency. "Quickly, set it down." As Derek placed the pizza on a table, the clocks started ticking again, moving to 9:15. The entire atmosphere shifted, the room grew warmer, and the colors became more vibrant. The man sighed in relief, "Thank you. Time stops here, you see. Only when the pizza arrives does it move forward, but just for a day." Derek, not wanting to understand or stay any longer, left the cottage, but the ticking of those clocks echoed in his mind for days. Story number 15. The Unmarked Grave. Driving on a secluded country road, Thomas was directed by his GPS to deliver a pizza to what looked like an old chapel. It was surrounded by a small, neglected graveyard. He hesitated, but the chapel lights were on, so he approached, pizza in hand. The door opened before he could knock. A frail old woman, dressed in a gown that looked as old as the chapel itself, greeted him. She didn't speak but pointed to a fresh grave, still open, just beside the chapel. Confused and feeling uneasy, Thomas saw a headstone next to the open grave, which read, "Here lies Thomas, the last delivery." Panic gripped him as he bolted back to his car and sped away. He later discovered that the chapel had been abandoned for years. Story number 16. The Missing Delivery Boy. Sophie had heard tales of a house on Elm Street where pizza delivery drivers went, but never returned. Thinking it was an urban legend to spook new employees, she didn't hesitate when an order came in for that very address. She rang the doorbell, and a seemingly kind elderly couple welcomed her. They invited her in, mentioning they had a special tip for her if she'd just wait a moment in their living room. The room was filled with photographs. To her horror, she recognized faces from the missing persons board at the police station, all pizza delivery drivers. She made a quick excuse and ran for the door. Behind her, she heard the old man say, "Shame, she looked just like our granddaughter." Story number 17. Midnight at the Lighthouse. Eric's delivery destination was the old coastal lighthouse. Locals believed it was haunted by a keeper who had gone mad, forever waiting for a supply delivery that never arrived. Reaching the top, Eric found a logbook. The latest entry, dated from over a century ago, read, "The storm is fierce, and my supplies are late. Hope they arrive before midnight." Suddenly, hands gripped him, trying to pull him to the edge. Fighting back, he managed to break free, dropping the pizza. A voice howled with disappointment. Eric raced down and vowed never to return, even if it meant changing his job. Story number 18. The Cursed Coin. Henry received a peculiar tip for his pizza delivery, an old coin with strange engravings. The customer, an old man with piercing eyes, told him to keep it safe and never spend it. Curious, Henry took it to a local historian. The coin was said to bring immense luck for a year, but after that, a terrible fate would befall its possessor unless passed on. As the days turned into months, Henry enjoyed incredible luck. But as the year's end neared, he felt an increasing dread. He tried to give away the coin, but it always found its way back to him. Story number 19. The Endless Loop. Every Thursday at 8 p.m., like clockwork, Rita delivered a pizza to an old Victorian house. The resident, an old woman, would always say, "Thank you, dear. See you next Thursday." One day, Rita mentioned the regular delivery to a colleague who looked puzzled. "That house burned down years ago," he said, "and the old woman with it." The following Thursday, Rita approached the house with caution. As expected, the old woman opened the door. This time, however, she looked Rita straight in the eyes and whispered, "I told you, see you next Thursday." Behind her, flames roared to life, engulfing the house, but by the next week, everything was back to normal, waiting for the next delivery. Story number 20. The Labyrinth Basement. Dana was delivering to a mansion she'd never been to before. The door was answered by a man with a deep, resonating voice. He asked Dana to place the pizza in the basement, explaining that he had a home theater set up down there for movie nights. Upon entering the basement, she was met with a vast labyrinth of hallways filled with mirrors and statues. Realizing she was lost, Dana heard the man's voice echo, "Find your way out before the hour ends, or join my collection forever." Panicking, she stumbled through the corridors, coming across statues eerily resembling various delivery personnel. As the minutes ticked by, Dana used the warm pizza to mark her path. Just as hope was fading, she stumbled upon the stairs, rushing up and bolting out the door. When she looked back from her car, the mansion was nowhere to be seen. The end.